Today, we're going to be talking about audiobooks, the pros and the cons in my experience, and from some research that I've been able to gather. Hi, I'm John Cox, and this is Vagabond Vox. Welcome to the channel if this is your first time, or if you've been here before, welcome back. Last week, we had a similar discussion on books, which I will add to the video description if you want to check that one out as well. Just to add a little bit of credibility to my own experience on the subject, in the last year alone, I have listened to 38 audiobooks, and I've recently downloaded several more, and I'm kind of in a phase right now of bouncing between 4 or 5 of them. When I get tired of one, then I can kind of just bounce over to the next one. And it's a really weird combination of self-help books, books on small business, and fantasy books. So let's jump right into the pros. Pro number 1, audiobooks are fantastic for multitasking in that you can consume them while you're doing something else. And there's usually a few go-to activities for me personally, and I think for a lot of people, during which they listen to audiobooks if they do, which are driving, walking, and house chores. So I'm going to be providing some interesting data that I was able to uncover on the average American's habit of those 3 activities, about how much time we spend doing them, just in an effort to show how much time we have available potentially to be consuming audiobooks while we're doing these other things that may not be so fun in and of themselves. So basically just to show you how much opportunity there is potentially on the table for you to be learning new things or experiencing fun stories. So the average American spends at least an hour a day on the road driving, which is pretty crazy and kind of a statement about how non-walkable most of this country is, especially compared to Europe. But that could potentially be a topic we can dive in deeper in another episode. But we spend about an hour a day driving, more for some of us. The average audiobook is about 7 to 10 hours long, which means that over the course of a year, we could potentially be consuming 36 to 45 audiobooks just while we're driving. The next multitasking activity during which audiobooks could be listened to is walking. This is one of my favorite ones for listening to audiobooks. So shockingly and sadly, the average American only walks about 4,000 to 5,000 steps a day, which is only about 2 miles, which is definitely not enough according to a myriad of health studies. It seems like the hot minimum number of steps per day to target is about 10,000 steps. I'm personally more in the 15,000 to 25,000 steps a day lately schedule, which I'll be doing a video specifically about that on walking very soon. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to base our potential time on the table to listen to audiobooks while walking based on that 10,000 step a day target that we should all be hitting, provided, of course, that we're physically able to. So 10,000 steps takes approximately 1 hour and 40 minutes. And that's measured based on a dedicated walk, not just kind of accidentally doing a bunch of steps per day, like puttering around the house or something like that. This is like we're going on 1 or 2 walks, we're getting 10,000 steps. This is how long it's going to take, so an hour and 40 minutes. So if you're able to hit that target and spend about an hour and 40 minutes a day walking, that's almost 610 hours a year walking, which if you recall our average from earlier on how long the average audiobook is, 7 to 10 hours. That means that we have the potential to be listening to 60 to 70 audiobooks a year just while we're getting our 10,000 steps a day. And the third mundane activity that I had mentioned during which we could be consuming audiobooks is cleaning and house chores, which the average American spends about 504 hours a year. That's very specific, doing cleaning and house chores, which means that while doing those chores, we could be listening to about 50 to 60 audiobooks a year. So combining all of the above that we just discussed, just between those 3 activities, we have the time, if we were using all of that time to listen to audiobooks, to be consuming 150 to 200 audiobooks a year, which is an absurdly high number. It would probably be very difficult for most people to retain and even process that much information. And it also could get quite expensive if you're branching out beyond the public domain free audiobooks that are out there. But the main reason I wanted to show this data is just to kind of help out the people that feel like they'd like to be listening to more audiobooks, but they don't feel that they have the time in their schedule. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of a window into some potential time you may have on the table that you're taking for granted that you could use to listen to audiobooks if you want to. The second pro about audiobooks is that they are incredibly space effective as compared to normal books. you can carry your entire library of audiobooks just on your cell phone. The only real limiting factor there is how much available storage space you have on your phone, but the average audiobook is less than 1 GB in space, so you can have quite a few on your phone at any given time, and you only have to have a few downloaded at a time anyway, so you can have a whole bunch in your library, but just keep 5 or 10 downloaded that can kind of be your go-to books of the moment that you cycle between, unless you're sort of a one at a time person, in which case you only need about 1 GB of storage available for that at any given time. Where this pro comes in particularly handy is if you do a lot of traveling, because space is becoming very expensive when we travel. I especially have in mind the budget airlines like Allegiant, Spirit, and Frontier that really nickel and dime you for everything you bring on the plane, including your carry-on. So sometimes it may not be space effective to bring a real book with you. The third pro, and probably one of my favorite things about audiobooks, is the benefit of hearing an audiobook read by the actual author of the book when that is available. Not every author likes to read their own book for the audiobook or to voice act their own book, but there are a good handful that do. And this really can kind of help you get into the mind and the head and the artistic intent of the author when you hear the tone that they have and the inflection that they do on certain words and certain syllables. And if it's a story and they really kind of get into the voice acting a little bit, you can really get into the mind of the characters that they had in mind and the emotions that they're trying to convey. And this just adds a whole rich layer of depth to the book that you wouldn't necessarily get just by reading words on a page. A couple notable ones that come to mind that have been favorites for me is Neil Gaiman, who is a modern prolific fantasy writer, author of such titles as Good Omens, American Gods, and Stardust. He has this absolutely rich, amazing voice, and he really takes his time with his speaking. And not only is it a great way to experience his books, but it's also incredibly relaxing to hear him speak, which is a pretty nice perk as well. Another great example outside of the fantasy genre is Emily Ratajkowski's My Body, which is a sort of autobiographical reflection on her childhood and her experience growing up and growing into the modeling industry. It's a very hard-hitting and sort of emotional book because a lot of really bad stuff and really questionable and sketchy stuff happened to her both physically and psychologically in her time growing up and into the modeling industry. And you can really hear the emotional experience of the story she's telling because she chose to actually read the book herself for the audiobook. And in fact, you actually hear her choke up a couple times in the book. And it just really, really made the story very impactful. And as an aside, I think that that book is a book that everyone should read, but especially men. I may do a dedicated video just to why men should read that book at some point in the future, but just take my word for it for now. The fourth pro is one that I have quite a bit of personal experience with because I've done a pretty good amount of solo travel over the last 3 or 4 years. And if I'm being honest, it has been very lonely at times when I've been doing that, but I did it anyways. And at times when the loneliness seemed absolutely unbearable, I did find that having an audiobook sort of running all the time really helped allay that feeling, at least temporarily. I don't advocate this for a long-term solution to loneliness because ultimately what you need when you're lonely is real, genuine human connection, not just a voice coming out of your phone, but it can help you get through a tough period just by having it on in the background while you're doing stuff, whether or not you're really paying attention to it. And the fifth and final pro that I wanted to mention today is that audiobooks can be incredibly cost-effective compared to normal books. There are a myriad of free and paid options to get your hands on audiobooks. And I'm going to run through a few of them here as a resource for you guys, and I will also have links to this stuff in the video description. And please note that I do not have any financial affiliation with any of the companies that I'm about to mention. These are just ones that I personally use and have experience with, and I think they're a great resource. I'll start with Audible, which is Amazon's audiobook company. I've been using Audible for a number of years. It costs about $15 a month, and every month you get 1 book credit. And that credit can be used for any audiobook, regardless of the price, which ends up being quite a good deal because a lot of audiobooks, especially more popular ones that are new releases, tend to be more like $20 to $30. So you're saving quite a bit of money right there. Additionally, there are hundreds of free audiobooks on Audible from the public domain and from smaller authors that are just trying to get their work out there. Another great option for audiobooks is Spotify Premium. I've been using Spotify Premium for close to 10 years as my go-to music app, but they now also have audiobooks included with Spotify Premium. And what they do is they give you 15 hours of listen time for audiobooks on Spotify every month. And they say that the average audiobook on their app is about 7 hours. So that's getting you approximately 2 audiobooks a month without having to pay any additional money. And I did want to mention, of course, one completely free resource for consuming audiobooks, which is actually YouTube. There are tons and tons of free audiobooks uploaded to YouTube as videos. And there are entire channels dedicated to this that just upload free audiobooks for you to listen to whenever you like. And in fact, I've curated a few of those channels, and I'll pop those right in the video description for you to check out if you like. All right, moving on to the cons of audiobooks, which, to be honest, there aren't many that I could really think of or find, but there are a few. And as with my episode on books, some of the cons are kind of the other side of the pros, if that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, just listen, I will explain. The first con is content retention. In other words, it can be difficult at times to retain the content of audiobooks. And I wasn't really able to find any studies that corroborated this, but this is just speaking from my own personal experience, especially when I've been at those times where I've been listening to audiobooks on trips or something like that, or I've got a lot on my mind. And in those instances, the audiobooks just become background noise while I'm thinking about something else. And all of a sudden, I'll have a wake up moment after the audiobook's been playing for half an hour or an hour that I have no idea what's going on and have not been paying attention whatsoever. And sometimes this happens when I actually reach the end of a book and I'm like, I don't even know what happened in this book. I'm just at the end of it, so I have to restart it again. The second con is that audiobooks can potentially disrupt your sleep. This is a little bit of a tricky one because from my experience, again, there have definitely been times where I have had a hard time quieting my mind to go to sleep, and I put on an audiobook, and that has helped just zone me right out and put me to sleep really well. There have been other times where I've tried to do that, and maybe the book is a little bit too interesting, or the voice actor is a little too stimulating, and it actually keeps me from falling asleep. Or sometimes I'll fall asleep with the audiobook, but then the audiobook actually wakes me up several times throughout the middle of the night. And the third con, sort of on the back of the second one, and this is more of just a logistical annoyance, and that is that if you fall asleep to an audiobook, whenever you do fall asleep, the audiobook is going to continue to play, and then you will lose your spot. You'll wake up at some point, the audiobook will either be over or it'll be in the middle of it. You'll have to pause it and then spend some time figuring out where you left off so you can start back up from when you were actually conscious and paying attention. The fourth con is a little bit esoteric, but compared to real books, audiobooks don't really have any sort of tactile satisfaction because it's just a digital asset. You don't have something that you can hold in your hands, that you can touch, that you can give to someone else in a way that you're actually wrapping it up and it's something that they can open. And for a lover of books like me who also collects antique books, there's just something incredibly satisfying and sort of romanticized and nostalgic about a real book. Just the smell of the paper, the sound of the pages as you turn them, that's really, really satisfying, almost sort of like an ASMR type thing. The fifth con is a little bit more of a logistical one, and that is that if you are one of those people that is not great at keeping your phone charged or your headphones charged or earbuds, then you will lose access to your audiobook when one of those devices dies, which can be super annoying, whereas a regular book does not require any power. All you need is some light to be able to read it. The sixth and final con that I wanted to mention is sort of the shadow side of the first pro, which is that audiobooks are good for multitasking. But the shadow side of that is that audiobooks can be a way to enable you to never stop and relax, which is a topic I discussed more in the pros and cons of books video, which again, I'll link in the video description. But essentially, audiobooks are inherently designed to be consumed while doing something else. I think it's very, very rare for people to just be sitting down, listening to an audiobook, doing nothing else. But sometimes in our life, sitting down and doing nothing but reading a book or just doing one thing is exactly what we need. In conclusion, audiobooks are great in the right context. They are a totally different way to consume your favorite stories. They're a great way to turn mundane activities into an opportunity to learn or enjoy a story. And they're very cost effective and space effective. This has been episode 5 of Vagabond Fox. Thank you so much for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you next time.